Harriet Tubman said, "I freed 1,000 slaves and I would have freed 1,000 more had they known they were slaves."
In today's world, parents are faced with a dilemma. They either send their kid to public education knowing that they're being indoctrinated, or the other alternative is they homeschool them.
Imagine the moment that second 1,000 realized they were slaves.
Here I was, from my own indoctrination and damage as a child, taking what I thought was the right thing and what had been done for me, and well, he needs to study, he needs to get good grades.
They had been born into this slavery. They had not taken their chance. And then they had their own kids and they brought their kids into this same cycle over and over. And imagine the anger and the hurt that they were feeling when they realized they were enslaved.
We need critical thinkers. They have to be sovereign, and they have to be smart. And that is what a free man looks like.
And when my youngest looks at me and said, "I hate my brain, I've got to do something differently."
Those feel like the only two options. There's a third option out there.
I mean, I'm not going to disparage other children, but when you're around the heroes in our studios, when you walk in there and you talk to one of these kids that just true entrepreneurial mind, when I look at other children, it's like, that is an amazing child I can sit down and have an incredible conversation with. And that kid is breaking my heart.
As an educator who'd been perpetuating the system, I felt like I'd been perpetuating the system of slavery. As a father who had children about to embark on their own journey of slavery. Slavery. That is the game, and that is a word that I choose very, very intentionally. The game is convincing you that birds born in a cage think flying is an illness. The game is convincing you that you are meant to be in this cage, and that the only way that you are going to achieve anything, the happiness, the joy, the whatever, is by remaining in the same cage that everybody else is in.
What is the basis for public education now is to build consumers and to build Lennies. You know, Rockefeller, the man that founded, who started all public education, he was quoted in saying, "I don't want smart people. I want people smart enough to work for me."
And people said, "Well, what are you going to teach them for 12 years? So I'll teach them much about nothing."
That was the beginning of the end for us. Like, we did not need the 1776 minds.
Go take a look at the Declaration of Independence. Go take a look at any of the documents that any of the founding fathers wrote, and let me know how inarticulate, let me know how uneducated all of those humans were. All of those people who did not go to any sort of public conveyor belt schooling. They had far less access to all the information, and they were far more educated. Why?
So what is education doing right now? It is doing nothing. It is building nothing. It is building no one that is going to go out and change the world.
People say the school system is broken. The school system is working beautifully. It's working exactly as it's designed. A system that we'll say is in preparation for life, even though the game looks very different. But what we'll end up with is a blindly obedient population that's smart enough to follow orders, but not really thinking so much that they start to go, is there a better way to do this? That's why we're enslaved.
We need critical thinkers. We need entrepreneurs. We need free thinkers that have no dependence on anyone. They have to be sovereign, and they have to be smart. And when you have those two things together, it is an unstoppable power. And that is what a free man looks like.
And when you really actually are brave enough to ask that question, and brave enough to sit with the answers, it's one of those things that you can't unsee it. And when I understood what it was, there was no way I could be a part of it. I couldn't be a part of it perpetuating that system for other people, and I sure as hell was not going to do it for my own kids.
That is Every single American right now, all you have to do is step up and say, here I am. I'm gonna homeschool my kids. I'm gonna start my own school, and I'm gonna live a life with purpose by this code.
And it shouldn't be that crazy of a concept, right? But that's how it works. What language did you guys speak as you grew up? Oh, okay, cool. You didn't, so hold on. You don't speak Chinese? What language did your dad speak? Oh my goodness gracious. So since he spoke English and you grew up around him and he was speaking English, you spoke English. You didn't just start speaking Chinese, right? What school did he send you to learn how to walk? Oh shit, he didn't send you to a school. It just, that's the natural progression of a human, and you saw other people walk in, and so you got up and you started to try to walk, and you failed at it, by the way. You fell on your ass, and your parents, by the way, cheered on the failure because they knew if you kept failing at it over and over and over again, eventually you were going to get it. So there in and of itself, people don't like the fact that there's simplicity involved, but the reality is it is as simple as that. Do what you want them to do, be the person that you want them to be, and then as they're working to do that and failing at it, because they're falling down because they can't yet walk, or they're saying garbled up, making noises because they can't yet talk, you just keep encouraging that failure and you keep bringing them along while you keep being a better version of yourself. And eventually, they're able to do a whole hell of a lot just like you.
That's what we're doing at Apogee. We don't own these ideas. These are not, like living to a code. That's not new. At some point around the past 50 years, we decided we didn't need it. And now look at where we are in a society.
I went to school, I turned out fine. So that presupposes a few things. One, that school is exactly the same now as it was when we grew up. It is not. It's actually being more narrowly defined. The teachers are having even less intellectual freedom to do what they want to do and teach how they want to teach. Everything is being restricted and narrowed far more than when we grew up. There's also the question of, did you turn out fine? Did you? You went to school and you turned out fine. Cool. What does that mean? How's your marriage? Is that fine? How are your relationships with the rest of your family? Is it fine? How are the relationships with your kids? Are they fine? Do you love your work? Are you fine? Are you surviving or are you living? And then, hey, here's the third thing it presupposes, is that fine is a goal. Fine is a 4-letter F word as far as I'm concerned.
So we have to start fighting. It means that we have to start stepping up and making time with intentionality to be contributing members of our society, to being the healthy, best version of ourselves, so I can be the best father that I can be, so I can be the best parent, so I can be the best husband, so I can be the best wife, so I can be the best version of myself, so I can be a meaningful contributor to my community, to my church, to my client. Or you can pick up your phone, you can scroll, you can go to Amazon, you can pick the next thing that you want. You can order the fat food to be delivered to your door with the easiest convenience of just one swipe. It's so clear to me now how different these two lives are, and it's so convenient to be this one. It's so pathetic to be this one. And our schools right now are building people just to do this.
The best way to perpetuate a child's education is for the parent to perpetuate his or her own and bring the child along with it. Period, end of story. That parent gets better at doing the game of life, not the game of school, the game of life, and you bring the child along. That's the best way to educate somebody. It's not the best way to school them, it's the best way to educate. But if you're going to educate, and you got a parent who's driven and wants to get better and is humble enough to realize what they don't know, and they're brave enough to not just continue to learn, but to go ahead and unlearn something that is no longer relevant, that means they're able to adapt and they bring their kids along with them for the journey. You're creating an unstoppable individual because you're becoming an unstoppable individual.
It is time for parents. It is time for families to take back their lives. It is time for us to wake up We've been asleep, we've been lazy, we've been complacent, and with that, we created weak generations. Those weak generations have created hard times, and those hard times are gonna get so much worse unless we start waking up. It's time, and it's right now.
So I actually remember right where I was as a career educator, right where I was when I made the decision as a parent not to engage in the conveyor belt schooling program. I was outside in the parking lot, outside of the school that I worked in. I was sitting in a 2004 silver Toyota Corolla. It was 5 p.m. I had just finished a workday at the school. And I made the conscious decision that I had to do something. Truth be told, I wasn't sure what that meant. Were we gonna home educate? Was I gonna try to be audacious enough to start a school? I had no idea where we were gonna go. All I knew is that I needed to do something. That could very well be where you are. If I was there as a career educator, but I had started to really make the decision as a parent, I understand where you may be right now. And the reality is, we just want to help. So whether you're coming at this from a parental standpoint, you're coming at this as a career educator, you're just coming at it as somebody who wants to help the young hero in your life, let us walk alongside you. If you start engaging with us at apogeestrong.com, you can reach out. We can talk about the home education options. We can talk about what it looks like to find one of our schools. You may be even interested in starting one of our schools. All of those things are great, and I'll tell you what, even if it's not with us, we just want to help you to help the young heroes. Because again, I remember sitting there as a father, knowing that I didn't know exactly what I needed to do, but I needed to do something. Let us help you figure out what that something is. Let's go save the heroes.
I come from an education background. I have 2 degrees, both of them in education. I work now in the corporate education field. And so to step out of that world into homeschooling, home education, in some ways it's been scary, because that's stepping away from all the things I've been taught, all the things I lived growing up, all the things that you were expected to do.
You can take a look at home educating. That scares people right off the bat. People automatically go, well, now I've got to bring school home. And I don't have the time, and I don't have the knowledge. I don't have, which again, I like to point out the irony. All of us went through this system that now left us feeling ill-equipped to teach our own children. So we're going to put our children back in the system that left us feeling ill-equipped to teach them in the first place, because we don't remember anything, which means for sure they're not going to remember any of it. And then they're going to have to, again, that speaks to the how strong the pull of that system is.
We're taught to follow the recipe. And so often we're not ever actually stopping to ask ourselves, who created the recipe? What's the purpose of the recipe? What are we actually making? What's the end goal of it all? And it's almost to the point where as a society, we've created this structure, this path that may or may not have relevance.
I played the game very well myself. Graduated with all A's, honor student. I don't remember anything. None of it's applicable to my real life. And so I was having this realization because Bryce was like, well, all I'm doing is learning it and taking the test and I can make an A. And I'm like, well, what did you learn? Nothing. Okay, well, that's a waste of time. Let's do more of that. And then my youngest, every time I put a piece of paper in front of him or tried to have an academic anything, just broke him.
When I was in kindergarten, I was sent to the principal's office and got paddled because I had so much energy, right? They said that you couldn't come back to this school unless you're on medications. They told me that. I was duct taped to chairs. I was paddled because there was nothing wrong with me, but I had energy, and I had a lot of energy. And I needed challenges, I needed direction, I needed movement. If you sat me down in a chair, I was in hell. That is purgatory to a 7-year-old boy.
Schools will talk about the triangle all the time, right? Where you got the school over here that's partnering with the student and the parent. It's not a partnership, it's a dictatorship.
I need you to sit there for 6 hours. I need you to look at that whiteboard and do the things that I'm telling you to do on that board. You want to talk about, like, even now, as like a middle-aged man, nothing sounds more torturous than doing just that. And the thought of me asking one of my children to go and do that is absolutely insane.
Nobody would go work somewhere, anywhere, and the boss goes, okay, by the way, I'm gonna have you start working on this task, whether you like it or not. There's a bell that's gonna ring, and like Pavlov's dog, you're gonna go move to a different thing. You don't actually have, a whole lot of lunch breaks. I don't want you to talk when you're moving from one task to another, because you are gonna be changing buildings, but I want you to be quiet. I want you to go stand behind that other man that's right there in front of you, and there's gonna be another man right there. You guys do not talk. In fact, put your hands behind your back here. I want you to walk over there. We might let you go to the bathroom during that time. We might not. But while you're working, if you have to go to the bathroom, you raise your hand and ask. We may not actually let you do that. And then, by the way, you're going to work your 8-hour shift. And when you get done, you're going to go home. And we're going to send more work home with you. You're going to go. Who would sign up for that job? But that's what we do to our kids. And we do it for 12 years. That's why I call this the biggest religion in our country. Because if you're curious enough to ask the question, the hardest thing to do is be brave enough to then make a decision and take on responsibility for the answers that you find.
When you wake people up and they realize what's going on, but they don't know what to do, they're scared.
At this point, I have talked through this with thousands of parents. The logical progression of this conversation, I rarely will have anybody that goes, okay, this doesn't make any sense. Almost always people will go, okay, yeah, it makes sense. But it's that emotional attachment to, this is the way it's always been done, so I still feel like I need to do it this way, or if I really want to actually believe this, then I've got to make that decision, right? I've got to pull this out so it's easier a lot of times to even just say the system's broken. And here's what I'll do. I'll go ahead and say that I'm going to fight it. I'm going to fight this. I'm going to show up to the school board. I'm going to show up to the PTA meetings. I'm going to show up to this, because then I can still feel good about the fact that I'm fighting this while I'm still sending my child in there. So a lot of people, they'll say the things they wish they believed, and then what they do is what they believe, or what they're brave enough to believe.
I don't know of a family right now that's like, wow, the public school system, man, it's just crushing it. We just love it. Our kids are thriving, and we just can't wait for them to go tomorrow, and they just love it. I don't know of a family that's experiencing that.
Schooling as is, are we raising people who are recipe followers? Or are we actually raising people who can step out and be leaders? So instead of following the recipe and following the conveyor belt, instead it's setting those kids up so that they can follow the passions, learn just in time what they need to know, so that they can continue showing up in the world.
And as Matt will say, the system's not broken. The system's doing exactly what it's designed. The system is breaking us as people. It's breaking our children.
They're like, hey, we're the school. We're all partnering. By the way, kid, we're going to tell you exactly what to do. Parent, we're going to tell you exactly how to stay out of what we do.
And so the question is, if we've got this system that is so damaging to our kids, why is it that people keep participating in it? It's because it's all they've known. It's by design. It brings us in, we're sold a lie, a big fat lie. But if you look at the child that's a product of the system, it's usually not good. Kids are needlessly suffering at the hands of a system that was never, ever designed or created to benefit them.
Humans want to have input. We have thoughts. We want to go do something. We want to create something. Inherently, we want to create something good, I believe. A lot of times we can be influenced otherwise, but we want to go do something. We want to go create something. And all we have around us are things telling us, no, be quiet. Your thoughts don't matter. Your desires don't matter. Your, inherent gifts, your intuition, your excitement doesn't matter. The things that you love don't matter. I love this. I'm really good at this. I want to do this. That doesn't matter. That doesn't matter. Eventually, we have to get to the point where we're realizing we're kind of just saying you don't matter. Systemically, we're kind of saying you don't matter. And so what those young people, without any way to really reconcile that, what they're going to do is figure out, how can I matter? How can I make some sort of impact? How can I assert some sort of control? I don't have it over my environment. I don't have it over my captors. I've got no control. Those are the easiest thing for me to control is somebody younger and somebody smaller. That's about all I got in front of me that I can control. So yes, we've got a system that is designed and created to perpetuate, from a social standpoint, a bullying system. And then we go, oh, by the way, you can't do that either. Yes, it's exactly what happens. And then what do we do? We also medicate them early and often. And one of the biggest travesties is that we've got a whole bunch of actually really good educators who go into the system to really go help young people, but they're told to be teachers. They're no longer allowed to observe and go, who is that human? How do I inspire that human? What is the journey he or she is on? Like, what can we go do together? Like, let's lift your eyes to the horizon. No, they're told to be teachers, where it says, no. You've got the one pen that matters for every single other human under your control. We're gonna write one very narrow story, and it doesn't matter if that person doesn't see that being their own hero's journey. You're gonna force everybody into that narrow story, and then we're gonna make them comply with fear, where if you're not able to engage in that story, something's wrong with you.
And here I was, from my own indoctrination and damage as a child, taking what I thought was the right thing and what had been done for me, and he needs to study, he needs to get good grades. And when my youngest looks at me and said, I hate my brain, I had to stop. I had to do something differently.
I mean, I get a lot of flack from because again, good humans in the system, right? There's good teachers who are there. And so a lot of times they'll confuse what I'm saying as my disdain for the system. They'll confuse it as disdain for them, which is never, ever the case. I'm the biggest supporter of good human beings who are teachers and administrators, but I will never support the system itself, right? My disdain is for the system.
Who's designing the recipe? How long has the recipe been around? Is the recipe even valid? Is it something we want to eat with the end result for that recipe? Not for our family. We've seen through that. So we're not interested in creating worker bees who are just going to go get a new job and work alongside everybody else in their pods. That's not how our family's wired. That's not part of our family's culture. We're choosing to step outside of that.
So people would think, aren't you gambling with your kids' lives? What if you're wrong? Well, what if you're wrong and they spent 12 years in school? Do you know how much evidence there is of how bad the school system is? What if you're wrong and you did that? Well, what if you bring them over here and you try it out for a year or so and you're like, okay, this is not right, this is wrong. Well, you can always send them back. But what if you don't try? What if you never experienced it? What if you never investigated what this looks like for your child? And what if you're right? What if this is everything you could possibly ever imagine and then some, which is what it's been for me and for a lot of families, because you don't know what you don't know and you're too afraid to make a change. And that's on you. Are you gonna sleep easy at night because your kid is suffering because of your inability to make a decision? That's on you. If you make a decision it's the wrong one, make another one. But don't sit on it because you're comfortable and it's what everybody else is doing. Stand up, stand out. Do the right thing. Do the right thing that you know you need to do for your child so they're not suffering anymore. I watched mine suffer, and I was homeschooling. But I was taking the system and just doing it at home, and I had to stop. And that's on me. I'm having to fix that. And this is helping me do that.
I was angry. You may be angry as well. You may be angry that you went through the system. You may be angry you've put kids in the system. You have kids in the system now. You may be angry that this is something that has been done to young people for generations at this point. And I'm going to encourage you to tap into the energy that that anger is creating. The energy itself is not a bad thing. It is an indicator that something is very, very wrong. But I'm going to ask you not to fight wrong by doing other wrong. We don't need to go get mad. We don't need to email our teachers. We don't need to go protest the schools. We don't need to, look, I applaud the voice. I applaud the energy. I applaud the desire to do something better. So let's do something better. Better has everything to do with creating the new, creating the alternative, creating something that lifts everybody else up, creating something that frees the thousands of slaves among us. If you're interested in that, reach out to us at apogeestrong.com. Join us as we use that energy to go build the better and to go save the heroes.
If I could say anything to the men who've created Apogee, I would just say thank you. Like from the bottom of my heart, thank you. I mean, what we're doing and what y'all are doing is, you know, I truly believe is going to change the world.
If you go back 150 years, you saw no grades. You just saw a classroom with kids at different levels. They're older kids taking responsibilities to help support the younger kids. And that's what's happening in these learner-driven environments. That responsibility and that onus of critical thinking is being passed on from child to child, from hero to hero. And then you have the guy that's just up there, you know, bumping them so they stay in the right direction. It's magical, man. It's unlike anything I've ever seen, and it's something I so desperately wish that I had.
Yeah, I think so. To me, the reason Apogee is the future of education is because it's centered on learning. It's not centered on teaching a specific thing. It's centered on each individual kid's interests. It's centered on kind of capitalizing their strengths and real world skills. And that is what I think is most important for kids to be successful. You know, personally, as someone who struggled from kindergarten through basically my second year in college, you know, I think if I had been in an environment where I was able to study and learn real world skills in a school setting, life would have been a lot easier for me from about 6 to 20.
So an Apogee school is a microcosm of the real world. It's a microcosm of what it takes to be effective in the real world.
What does life look like different from doing schooling, taking that schooling and moving it into the home, and you're doing schooling just under your own roof, to now looking at how can we equip our boys so that they know how they can learn just in time. So instead of just in case learning, which is what much of the school system is based on, of, hey, let's learn algebra just in case you need to do this. Let's learn how to write a persuasive essay just in case you need to do this. Instead, let's find what their passions are and use those passions as a vehicle for them to actually learn how to learn.
So we take a look at physical health, because physical health always matters in life. So physical health is a focus on human physiology. How do you understand your physiology? How do you take control of your physiology? How do you impart good nutrition in there? How do you remain physically active? Different options for remaining physically active are there, but there's not an option to not be physically active.
Then my parents figured out, there's nothing wrong with this kid. I'm definitely not putting him on medication. But what we are gonna do as we're homeschooling him, every hour, he's gonna go outside and he's gonna run a lap around our 3-acre property. You know, he's gonna go out and he's gonna climb a rope. They got they got fire hoses that they throw over trees that make me try to climb a fire hose. You know, I'm out there chasing the dogs, taking a stick and trying to be, you know, Errol Flynn from Robin Hood. Then I'd come back in with acute focus and I was able just to do the thing. There's no desks. We had tables, we had couches, we had chairs. We could sit anywhere that we wanted, just like in our studios. There are desks that they can use if they want to. They're usually vacant because some kid is over there in a beanbag. Another one is against the wall in a wall sit as he's holding his journal, planning for how he's gonna task organize his projects for the day.
Human health matters, so physical education, true physical education, actually engaging in physical education is a non-negotiable part of the day. Right? So that is a component of it. Conversations are something we engage in all the time. Communication matters. And we say that and everybody goes, yes, but let's talk about what kind of communication matters.
I mean, being in a relationship with another human is the hardest thing you'll ever do in your life. And school is not teaching that. You know, they get out in the world and they're like, oh crap, this is not what wait, I have a piece of paper that says I'm skilled in all these things. Well, yeah. Well, you suck at relationships and communication and all the things that are really valuable to make you an awesome human and succeed in life. And that's the skills they're getting here. Everything that's lacking in the system, the kids are given right here.
Need to be able to have an engaging conversation. Need to understand the rules of engagement for a good conversation. How do I clearly articulate what it is that I believe and why I believe it? How do I genuinely listen to another point of view that may differ from my own and not get emotionally responsive to that, to actually take a look at their evidence? And how do I become brave enough to where if better evidence is presented to me, I'm actually willing to go ahead and change my mind? That matters. So then daily Socratic conversations that give them the reps of doing those kinds of communication exercises, that's a part of the day. And that's part of the day for a 5-year-old all the way up to an 18-year-old.
In a learner-driven environment, a true Socratic, and we're a hybrid between, you know, project-driven learning and Socratic education. And what that looks like in a studio, in a classroom, is learner-driven. The students, the heroes in that classroom, they are the ones that are driving everything. They've been assigned a project. They need to figure out, I don't know, how much volume goes into the mulch that's gonna go out onto our playscape. I'm talking about like 2nd or 3rd graders. So first they have to figure out what are the problems, what are the formulas, what's the math that we need to know. They have to like pick which type of mulch is the better mulch, right? Then they have to do a cost analysis of figuring out which ones are gonna make the most sense that's gonna last so long, and also which ones they wanna play with. And truth be told, they picked a really crappy one. You know what we did? We put it in there. And they had to play on crappy mulch. But they learned. So in this environment, in this learner-driven environment, they get to see real-time consequences to their decisions. We are giving them thousands of decisions in a day. So in one day, what, you know, at a public school, kid maybe uses, I don't know what percentage of their brain, the number of decisions that they have to make that impact their own life are so few because they are told how to do everything. Not here it's all on them. And we have for so long underestimated the potential and capacity for these children to truly excel. The more you give them, the more they want. The more challenges you put in front of them, the harder they're pushing to do more.
So writing matters. What kind of writing matters? Writing that allows you to get your thinking out, or writing that communicates a very specific idea, like writing an email, writing ad copy. Nobody writes essays other than academics.
So all of a sudden you now have all these real world challenges that people deal with on a day-to-day basis, as opposed to, I need to write a persuasive essay. Instead, it's well, let me write an email to this person asking for an introduction, and through that process, they're learning all that persuasive conversation, for example, but they're doing it in a way that actually matters to them.
Understanding that responsibility precedes freedom. So on campus, these young heroes have the responsibility to take on their own individualized academic goals. And they're gonna work on their own academic goals with coaches on the side of them and other humans around them as they work through all of these academic problems. But they're gonna set their own responsibilities, their own goals, and as they achieve those, then it unlocks the freedoms on campus, because that's how life actually works. You gotta take care of your responsibilities, and it opens up more freedoms.
If you made a family, that family's your responsibility. It's your responsibility to feed them. It's your responsibility to show them what right and wrong looks like, to give them integrity. It's your responsibility to educate them. You could just start a school. And that is exactly what I did.
And I said, I know this school is the path forward. I know this school system is what these kids need. Do I continue on the same path and get the same results in my life that I've always gotten, which are okay? Or do I make a commitment to do something different? And if you make that commitment to shift and do something different, well, now there's a whole community of people that want to run with you, support you, be in your corner, and help you to become the person that you're supposed to be.
Educating Modern Day Heroes equipped me to be super confident in what I was doing with my kids. It took the anxiety and the stress and the doubt away, right? The fear. My kids are 15 and 17, and I haven't done anything academically with them in a year. And they have thrived because of it. My oldest one no longer has existential dread about his life. My youngest one no longer hates his brain. That was worth I cannot put into words what it has done.
I mean, I'm not going to disparage other children, but when you're around the heroes in our studios, when you walk in there and you talk to one of these kids that just true entrepreneurial mind, they're going to take a product that they figured out the cost of, how long it takes to make. They're going to take that and figure out how to market it and how to take it to market. And then they're going to go to an event or a home craft store or a farmer's market and try and sell that product. And they're going to come back and present a P&L to their class and to their guides about how that product was successful, if they made some money or if they didn't. The whole entire studio is doing this. And that kid is 7 years old. When I look at other children, I'm just like, it's night and day. It's black and white. This A and B, it's like, that is an amazing child I can sit down and have an incredible conversation with. And that kid is breaking my heart.
So my daughter started at public school when COVID hit. We pulled her out, homeschooled for 2 years. And then we enrolled her in Apogee Cedar Park last year. Yeah, I think the difference in Cedar Park specifically versus one, the homeschool, and two, the public school is just the freedom, right? She has the freedom to be who she is. They don't constrict her into trying, be someone who can test out in this grade of math or test out in this grade of language arts. It's Riley gets to show up on a daily basis, be who she is, and in that, let her natural abilities and traits come out. Homeschool brought a little bit of a different dynamic, right? When the mother is trying to be a teacher, it's just a little bit separate, right? The homeschool happened, 20 feet to our left, right, at our kitchen table. And so I think there was just certain dynamics, in that we just weren't able to overcome, that Apogee Cedar Park has allowed us allowed her to overcome.
Other responsibilities on campus. You have jobs on campus. You have jobs off campus. Internships matter. Apprenticeships matter in areas that you want. to go work in. Having those experiences so you can see, yeah, I really do like that, or I don't. So we have a heavy internship, apprenticeship focus. Having a heavy focus on being exposed to a broad number of topics, but not in a sit down while we barf at you mode, in an exploration mode. It's a much different thing if I say, hey, let's all sit down right here and I'm going to teach you all about all of these tools. This is a socket wrench. Socket wrench was invented by, and the kids are going, man, I don't care. But if we go, hey, kids, we're going to go out and we're going to build a rocket, and we've got an engine over here that we need to get prepped, and we're going to shove it in that rocket. We're going to see how high we can get that rocket to fly, and we're going to test a bunch of different fuels. And then we go out and start to do that with that big goal in mind. And we go, ooh, this part needs to be tightened. I'll tell you what, here's what we can, this thing's called a socket wrench. So we can do that because it's going to be a means to an end to do what we want to do. So students are exposed to new things through big projects every 4 to 6 weeks. So the day is just a microcosm of all those things. But here's another part that differentiates us from everybody. When those young people go home, who are they exposed to? We're not saying, hey, we're going to give you homework. Who are they exposed? They're exposed to the parents that are raising them. So if we're talking growth mindset all day, we're talking effective communication all day, we're talking all of these meta skills that are going to matter, the ability to adapt and to have great communication, and we're talking about all this all day, and then they go home to an environment that's completely the antithesis of that, we're still going to be in trouble. So part of what we do as well is we're also coming alongside the parents.
The families, the parents, like that's part of it. It is a very important element. That family unit is one of the many things that Apogee Strong and Apogee School and Apogee Foundation that we're all going after is trying to rebuild that family. And when you look at our families are intimately involved in their heroes' life at school. They have to help them build these projects. They have to help what it looks like to launch this thing. And looking at the parents and looking at the heroes and seeing the joy, I mean, it was so contagious. And I was walking through those halls, and I'm like getting emotional just thinking about it. And all I had heard the whole entire school year was laughing, and like giggles and like, oh my gosh, do you know what I just did? Like I made $27 off this thing that I created, this thing that I built, and like, I can't wait to see you next year, and it was just silent in there. And I had taken for granted what it is supposed to sound like in a real school. Because I had this vision, I had this dream, I had this idea, I had this want. It's everything that I didn't have. Every kid in every one of those heroes walks up, and on the side of the wall is the code that all of them, they all agree to what that code is, and they go and they write their names on the wall, agreeing that they're going to support that code. They hold each other accountable for it. You know how much bullying is in there? None. You know how many times like the thought of having to discipline a child in that school? 0. Because it all happens naturally within that community. Sometimes it looks like Lord of the Flies, right, when it first starts, and then things start to get figured out and chemistry start to happen, and that contagion that is true critical thinking lights inside of them, and then it's just like, it's absolute beauty. At the end of that school year, walking through those classrooms and hearing silence just killed me. Just like those kids, just like those parents, I wanted nothing more than just to have school again tomorrow. So I could walk back into that door, to hear those laughs, to look at them learn, to see the next project or creation or collaboration, the next imagination. They literally would just imagine a thing, build that thing, and then take that thing to market. They're equivalent of a 3rd grader.
There's a much better path that you can follow, and that's Apogee. And Apogee gives you all the tools, all of the materials that you need to be successful in this journey, to create your own curriculum, to figure out your own path, to truly go on a hero's journey where you can rise and become something that you never really thought that you could become before.
You know, if I'm honest, one of the things that I was most excited about in 2020 was the fact that COVID shut the schools down. What I knew would happen, what inevitably did happen, was parents got to see a little peek behind the curtain. They got to see what was and was not happening with their young heroes in a schooling system that they had placed blind trust in for far too long. So I very much look at that whole time as a moment where there was a silver lining. But the silver lining doesn't get to exist by itself. Now that we know, now that we're aware, we have to do something about it. We have to take what we know. We've got to pull the curtain back even deeper. And we've got to figure out what to do for our young heroes. And that's what I'm going to encourage you to do, is reach out to us at apogeestrong.com. Let's pull the curtain a little bit more. Let's take a look at the options. Let's go save the heroes.
So our job is just to question that narrative. You are correct in assuming that your job as a parent is to do your best to lead that young person to be an educated human being. You're correct. You are the primary educator. You have been since day one. All of these conversations that we're having around raising an educated human being, what we have to remember is we've grown up believing this is what it looks like. We've grown up with parents who said, no, this is what it looks like. We're all born into this. So we don't stop a lot of times to question ourselves, to question why. And that's not necessarily our fault, but what happens is once we start to question it, once we start to ask those questions, that's where that bravery comes back in, where we've got to go, okay, does college mean educated? Can you be educated without college? What does college do? Is that actually what education looks like? We have to ask ourselves all of those questions, and that's where the argument starts to break down.
It's the mom that's like, you know, my kid's not a hero, they need schooling. I would say that to the mom, that's a mindset issue. You know, you have to think, what kind of child am I going to gift the world one day? You know, I'm sorry, but we have enough highly educated a-holes out there already, okay? That's not what I want for my children. And when you sit down and you have a conversation with a mom about what is the end goal of this journey you're going on with your child, is it to get a piece of paper and then like push them out in the world, oh, look how wonderful this is? Or do you want them to have an impact?
You almost never hear a parent that's like, my kid, not very bright. You don't hear those conversations. You hear, I know people say this about their kids all the time, but my child's really, really smart. My kid's really, like, that's the conversation that you hear. And by the way, rightfully so. So, you know, the initial educator in me, the Socratic educator in me wants to say, okay, define dumb for me. What does that mean? What does that mean, my kid will be dumb, or my kid will be dumb because of me? What does that actually mean? Because I want people to think through that. But the reality is when they're just feeling their way through whatever is normal, in those first 5 years, they're going, oh my gosh, this young person I have in front of me is brilliant. He did this, she said this, she had this. And then what happens is we send them off to a system that has a very narrowly defined view of what success is. You've got to play this specific game well at this specific time, whether it matches with your child's interests, development level, background, no matter what. You've got to play this game really well. And if you don't, well, then we're going to equate that with you're not intelligent. But as a whole, people are born wildly, wildly intelligent. And what happens is we end up schooling them out of it. We end up training them out of it. We end up focusing them so much. They're like, wait, I'm a genius over here. I'm brilliant over here. John Taylor Gatto said genius is as common as dirt. After working with thousands and thousands of families, I would tend to agree. But they're going, man, my child is a genius right here. Look at all, like, this is a genius. Like, oh my gosh. hey, do school. And it's not on that same spectrum. And they're like, well, they don't actually like that. Oh, okay, well, now they're dumb. And so if I'm gonna, put them in a different environment, now I'm experimenting on them somehow because we're not doing this narrow thing. And like, this is the experiment. They're a genius. They're brilliant humans. They're going down this trajectory. School ends up being the experiment. It's been this 120-year experiment and it's not going well. Your child's a genius, almost guaranteed. Your job is to cultivate that, not to narrowly define this other game that they're never gonna play again after these few years, not to train them out of it, not to give them a false sense of like, hey, I'm not very bright.
Starting school is hard, first of all. The first year was really, really, really hard. Every mistake that you could possibly make, I made. Even as like a successful businessman, I made mistakes in the business. As a good leader, I made mistakes as a leader. As what I think to be a very great educator and instructor, as a Green Beret, I've pretty much done it my whole entire life. And I made every mistake that you can do as a teacher, as a guide, as an instructor. Made them all.
The reality is we have done this for a long time. We've made all of the mistakes. We've launched a number of schools. We've helped thousands of people through home educating. We've seen the game of getting into schools and getting into college. We've seen the game of going straight into the workforce. We've seen the game of building out six-figure businesses before kids even leave high school. We've seen every single bit of that. So we're truncating essentially 2 decades of knowledge into what we are doing here. So really what we're selling is speed of awareness. It's the speed in which you get to the point from being schooled to being educated.
And when it comes to the character of your child and who they're gonna end up ultimately being, and you look at a system that's not serving children well, are you really comfortable? Are you really gonna sleep well at night, knowing that what the outcome could possibly be?
So here's the reality of it. It's very possible that you hear all of these things, that all of a sudden you just go, I get it. That makes sense to me. I should have always had it. And by the way, I can have it right now. I can pull my child from school right now. I can just move on, bring them along. Like I don't need to go to any outside. So I don't need to. You may be in that spot right now, and I would argue that's exactly where you need to be. If there is a fear in doing that, if there is still a fear and I don't know how, if there is that understanding of like, no, that is what I want, and I want to be around other like-minded people who believe that, but I also am going to need somebody to walk alongside me in this to get me to where I want to go, to get our family where we want to go. That's the bridge. That's what we are, is we're the bridge to get to that understanding. We're the bridge to connect you to other like-minded people who are also saying, we get it now, but we want to come together with an intentional community to go build. We want to be a part of the building process. We want to be a part of the mission of this bloodless revolution of building and changing and shifting the culture to this new reality so that future generations, so that my kids, and my kids' kids, they are born into a society that understands what freedom looks like. And for them, that's their norm. I want to be a part of that mission of raising the baseline of what normal looks like now for our culture.
Yes, I think Apogee as a whole, the men's program, the young men's program, and the school have taught me that freedom is really everything, right? Without freedom, and really it's mental freedom, right? You personally as a man, having the freedom, between your ears is the first bedrock that you have to kind of accomplish, right? And then once you have that, you're able to kind of detach from any of these other quote unquote crutches we have in the world, whether it be the traditional schooling, the traditional, finances, the traditional job, right? There's freedom is everything, right? I mean, that's just what it's really come down to me, is that the ability to not have to answer to anyone but yourself is ultimately the goal that I think each man is striving for.
Again, you've grown up in the society where that is just what everybody does, right? Everybody just goes, so you've planned on that. Likely when you've planned to have a family, you've planned on, and hey, by the way, dad's going to work, mom's going to work, we send the kids to school. So that means we can bring in this much money, and it also affords us this much time because we're now outsourcing the education for our young people to somebody else, to a government entity. Even the people that are like, I don't outsource my freedom to the government, I don't outsource anything to the government, are still outsourcing their kids to the government. And they're doing but they've planned on that. And again, they didn't know there were alternatives to take a look. So then people find out, wait a second, there's alternatives. And it's actually almost always better than sending my kids into the conveyor belt program. So now I've got to figure some things out.
Yeah, the relationship between freedom and responsibility is one and one, right? Without the responsibility and the personal responsibility to do the things that you have to do each day, you'll never achieve the freedom you want in your life.
You're rarely ever given the keys to unlock the chains of your own enslavement, for sure. I'm with you. It's not necessarily the way the world's ever going to be built. Okay, so now what? Do you accept that and you just willingly turn a blind eye? Do you accept it, send your kids back into the fire anyways, crossing your fingers that they won't get burned, and then trying to do burn treatment when they come home? Or do you figure out a way so that they're not lit on fire every single day? That's not a question that I can answer for anybody. All I can do is get people to ask themselves that question, and if they're brave enough, sit with it long enough to decide what you're going to do next.
Yeah, if I was talking to someone who's on the fence, I'd probably tell them not to join. I think I say that kind of tongue in cheek, but I think it's one of the things that drew me here was, the same thing with the school. It's not for everyone. And if you don't want to dive in, you don't want to commit yourself, then don't join, right? And so I think I would tell them that the program is life-changing if you want to put the work in, but no one's going to drag you through it. And so if you aren't going to fully jump in, the deep end without your swimmies and learn how to swim, then, maybe wait until you're ready to commit like that.
So it's very possible right now that you feel like your entire worldview has been shaken up. I definitely did. As an educator, as a father, I'd come to the realization that the things that I thought I knew, the things that had been familiar to me, I had confused with truth, and that is not an easy place to be. But I didn't have anywhere to go. I didn't have anybody to connect with. I didn't think I knew anybody else who had the same shift taking place in their worldview. I can promise you, if this is a worldview shaking moment, we now have hundreds, if not thousands of us who've experienced the exact same thing and just want to walk alongside you. Reach out to us at apogeestrong.com. Let's save the heroes together.
If I realized that my kids had free access to food, I had never planned on paying for food for my children ever. And they had free access to food. I still had the ability to pay for food, but I didn't have to. They had it for free. And at one point, I learned that each bite of that food, there was just a little tiny bit of poison that was in there. I'd go to any length to do whatever I needed to do to make sure that they were getting food that wasn't poisoned.
If I were talking to another parent who is considering Apogee Cedar Park, I would tell them not to think about it another second, to absolutely dive in, go for it, fully commit. Apogee, Cedar Park and Apogee kind of learning centers or education moving forward is the future of education.
The mission of Apogee Strong is quite literally to reseed the foundations of a free society by disrupting education for the entire family.
So I believe in this idea. So if it is going to succeed, the next generation has to believe it. The next generation has to be critical thinkers.
So they say, well, what is the difference between an Apogee school? What is the elevator pitch? And the best thing that I can say is that normal school is a microcosm of normal school. Apogee schools are a microcosm of real life.
What are the challenges? It's scaling, it's growing, it's finding, like we know what the mission is, we know what our purpose is, we have the code. How fast are Matt and I able to build this out? You know, we don't own this. We want to give the keys to the castle so everybody else can live this fulfilling, beautiful, meaningful life and start being contributing members of what it means to be an American again.
So at Apogee School, the students are called heroes for a specific reason. It's to create this distinction that they're not in the public education system. They're not in a conveyor belt system. A hero goes on a hero's journey, and that journey is individual. The entire group or the entire studio that they call the classroom studios, that studio is not going on the same journey together. They're each individually going on their separate hero's journey.
And see, that's the key for people to understand about the human condition. Our design is it's not about doing something to the young people. It's about just making sure the environment is what we want the environment to be and letting them catch all of those things and develop appropriately. I always relate it to the flower in the garden. You don't take that flower, plant that seed, and then yell at it. You check the environment. The flower does what the flower is going to do. It just grows. If you've got the environment right, it's going to grow to the best of its ability.
What Apogee is going to do is it's going to give your kid the flexibility and control of their own educational path with the guardrails and the guides joining them in that journey.
That's how human beings are wired too. So you're already the primary educator because you're creating the environment. The better you can create the environment, the better that young hero is going to grow. You surely don't want to put them in a faux environment of schooling that has nothing to do with real life. But you're the primary educator, period, whether you send them to school or not. You don't have a choice.
And so it allows you to create a whole environment that can take a kid from not knowing who they are, scared and feeling like they're disconnected, like they're not part of anything, to being a leader and that beacon, that kid that every other parent wishes their kid could be like.
All it is a very simple return to the way it's always worked, because it's a return to the truth of how humans work.
But if we know that there's a possibility that they can shine and thrive in an environment like this, I don't know why there would be any doubt whatsoever as to whether this would be the thing that you would do as a parent.
What is working against us right now is that the old is seen as free. And that's a hard barrier to get around when you've always planned on free. That's a really hard thing, because what we like is a very clearly defined slavery. It's what we've always had. And the thought of freedom and understanding the responsibility that goes around that is frightening to us because it's unsure, because it's ambiguous, because it's seemingly esoteric. And so we're like, ooh, nope, sign me up for the thing that I know for sure is going to be there step 1 through 10, even if I'm going to be enslaved. So the payoff as a young person who not only lives in that freedom, that's the only way they want to live. They're actually at peace with that, and they're not bogged down by all the things that we end up getting bogged down by if we do it to the best of our ability. And again, there's no panacea. If we were saying, here's the utopia, you should run the other way.
What's different with educating modern day heroes? At the end of the day, it's setting up a framework for success, looking at what do they need to be successful humans out in the world? What do they need to be future leaders? What do they need to be successful? We're focusing on those things.
But now that you know enough to ask the question, it's not about guilt or shame. It's about now what? Do you want to keep wrestling with this conversation with yourself, with your own family? Do you want to wrestle with that conversation and have to come to a conclusion? Once I understood what that game was and that I would be sending my own kids into the fire and that I was working in a system that was all about having kids in the fire, I could no longer tolerate it for myself. It wasn't about guilt or shame because I'd been in there perpetuating the system. I'd been there perpetuating, not just for thousands of kids. I just had to decide, now that I know what I know, now what? Now what do I do? And that's where all these parents are too. Now you know. At least you know enough to start the conversation. At least you know enough to start to pull the string. And the more you pull it, I promise you, the more it will unravel until it's not there. You've got to decide whether or not you want to pull it. No guilt, no shame, but you have a decision to make. Look, we have no desire to burn down all of the public schools. This is not an attack on the schools. This is not an effort to go tear anything down. It is the call to start a revolution by building up. We want to build up our communities. We want to build the alternative. We want to build the place that inspires the young heroes to be better. And as we build more, then we render the old obsolete. So again, this is not an attack on schools. This is not an attack on teachers. It's not an attack on administrators. This is a call to revolutionize the building of something that will bring back the seeds of a free society by disrupting education. And we're inviting you to join us, not in the process of tearing down, but in the process of building the new that saves the heroes.